All right, it's good to see everyone here this afternoon. There are some special folks in attendance that got us to where we are. I would like to first ask our past presidents in attendance to please stand. Let's all give them a round of applause, please. We've got quite a few of them here today. I would like now to recognize your current board of directors. You saw these folks on the loop that played before the meeting. Would all members of the 2024 board of directors please stand? Thank you for your service and all that you do on behalf of the association. Being on the leadership team does not happen overnight, and we need to support, feedback, input, and help to advance the goals and objectives of the association. In September, OBAR will be looking for members to serve on a 2025 committee or just help out with one of our programs and projects planned for the next year. And lastly, these folks have stepped up to the plate this year to serve as our community partners. Through investment dollars and volunteer support, the participation of our partners help offset the cost of association programming and helps keep your dues low.
You know, it'll be almost 40 years we've never had a dues increase.
40 years, you hear that? We have not had a dues increase. We have 4 levels of partnership that we have been highlighting at every meeting and event throughout the year. At the office and on our partner banners. If you are a silver, gold, diamond, or platinum Good Neighbor partner, please stand so that our membership can thank you for your support. Our silver partners, Tidewater Home Funding, Twitty since 1978, Southern Bank, Southern Trust, Pro Solutions Pest Control, RBA, Own Real Estate, Master Heating and Cooling, Howard Hanna Real Estate Services, East Home Services, Coast Realty, Atlantic Coast. These are our silver community partners. Also our gold partners, Carolina Design Realty, Elite Insurance Agency, Joe Lamb Jr. Associates, Saga Realty and Construction, Town Bank Mortgage, Village Realty. And on our diamond community partners, we have First Bank, Brindley Beach Vacation and Sales, Bankers Insurance, Arbor Home Loans, and our platinum community partner is Stephen Gillis with State Farm. Stephen, would you like to say anything?
He cannot make it today.
Oh, sorry. It's so big I didn't see he was missing. Thank you very much, Stephen. All right, so since our April general membership meeting, we have had several new members join the association. With Membership Services Chair Maslin Seal, I would like to take the opportunity to recognize our new members. Do we have any new members attending today that have completed all new member orientation requirements? If so, please stand. Please stay after the meeting for a picture with Chair Maslin Seal for our local paper. Our next member orientation is scheduled for September 5th, and thanks for your support. At this time, I would like to call Stephanie Walker up to the podium. Last week, North Carolina Realtors held an election for 2025 officers and directors. There was a contested race for the NAR at-large director seat, with 3 candidates on the ballot. I sent a letter to membership on the last day of the election asking that you vote for one of our own, and many of you heeded the call. I am very excited to officially announce that Stephanie Walker generated the most votes. Stephanie, we're very proud of all you've accomplished, and these are for you to show our appreciation of your service to OBAR and the region. Please join me in congratulating Stephanie as the NCR NAR Director at Large. Would you please stay up here with me on the next item of the agenda too, Stephanie? Yeah, you're not. Please stay up here with me, would you?
So I just want to thank everybody who cast a vote. It really did make a difference. If you look at the vote totals, it was huge. And so thank you guys very, very much.
Okay, Stephanie's going to stay up with me.
What she didn't say was it was a landslide because of OBAR members. So there you go. Thank you.
It's amazing what happens when we all pull together.
It is.
Thank you, Stephanie. As you can see on the agenda, we have a very special presentation. NAR Emeritus Inductees. When I say this is special, I can't remember ever having any member inducted as an emeritus member of NAR. Do you recall, Stephanie? Any? Emeritus typically is used to identify someone that still holds a title or position after they retire, but in the realtor world, it means something different. NAR Realtor Emeritus status is given to a realtor who has been an active realtor for at least 40 years and has served at least 1 year on a national committee. Earlier this year, after submitting applications, OBAR was notified that 5 members were approved for National Realtor Emeritus status at the NAR Realtor Legislative meetings in May. In addition to being bestowed such a distinctive honor and designation, beginning in 2025, these realtors will no longer be included in NAR dues calculations. Free dues. At this time, I would like to call each recipient to the podium to present them with the Emeritus Certificate, letter, and pin. John Myers. David Parrott. Jackie Rick Sample. David Watson. With over 200 years of real estate experience standing in front of you, we're looking at the wealth of real estate knowledge, grit, resiliency, adaptability, and perseverance. Any words of advice to your colleagues?
Let's start with David Watson's always got some words of advice.
I've enjoyed being a realtor for almost 50 years. And I was thinking about quitting, but since the dues are going to be free, I'm in. I'm all in.
I'm at a loss of words.
Really?
No, not
I
really.
was going to say, I think John Myers, I know.
I can't say what I want to say. Thank you all.
They always kick me off the podium for talking too much, but I just wanted to share some quick things with you. This we're going to go over later, the form changes. Trust me, it's no big deal. Excuse my hand for shaking. It's Parkinson's, but that's okay. I'm good with it. But real quickly, because I don't want to kick me off. So when I started in 1980, the interest rates were 18%. We didn't have an MLS. So, and we didn't get an MLS until 1985, which was book form, one photo, about a 3x6 little area with 15 fields in it, and you had to call around and ask what they had for sale. You couldn't call on your cell phone. So you're riding down the street to go show property, and the buyer says, well, what about that one? Had a new sign on it. I don't know. So then you had to go find a phone booth. And if you found the phone booth, and I had my favorite ones, you had to call and say, can I show it? And then I learned the hard way that just because they let you show it didn't mean they'd co-broke with you. Can I show it? Will you co-broke with me? And then I found out that just because they said those two things didn't mean they would pay the commission I was looking for. So can I show it? Will you co-broke with me? What is the commission? Great. You can show it today. You have to come get a key. There were no lock boxes. So if you were lucky enough to write an offer, the good news back then was it was only 2 pages long. You had to bring it back to the office. We didn't have a fax machine. They didn't come out until 1987 when you and I opened up Resort Realty. That we bought a $1,500 fax machine, and we couldn't find anybody else that had one. And when we told them what they did, they said, right, you should send paper through the phone. And then we found out a couple months later that it was thermal paper and the image would disappear. So we had to make copies of everything we faxed after that. And it wasn't legal yet. So anyway, my point to all this is it could be a hell of a lot harder than just calling around to say, what is the commission, if any, that you're offering? So don't get lost in the weeds with what we're going through this afternoon.
Okay. There's not much to add after that, David. Thank you. I would like to just mention one memory that sticks in my mind so clearly, and that was the first time that I bought my first lot in First Flight Village. It was listed by Jim Perry at Jim Perry and Company. So as David mentioned, I had to call and ask if I could co-broke that lot. Jim Perry made me go sit in front of him at his desk and grill me about whether or not he would let me sell that lot to myself. And I have had more fun giving him a hard time about that. But yeah, things have changed a lot. Certainly the Realtor organization has opened a lot of doors for a lot of us, and I'm very grateful for this organization.
One thing. Sorry about that. To give you some more context, real briefly, I just want to let you know when I became a realtor in 1981, and there wasn't really a need to because we didn't have an MLS. But I wanted to go to GRI, and I could get a discount by being a realtor. So when I was inducted, Tim Midget was president. I was the 41st member in 1981. And 15 of those were at Midget Realty on Hatteras Island.
Paul Bro was also awarded the emeritus status. He could not be with us here today, but we will get his certificate, letter, and pin to him as well. How about a big round of applause for everybody? We would like to get a picture of you all in the lobby, if you would. Dave Watson, I'd like to get a picture of you all in the lobby, please. Yeah, right now. And on to reports. Would Secretary Shelley O'Grady please come forward?
Good afternoon. The meeting minutes from the last meeting, which was in April for the general membership meeting, are in your packet on your table. Are there any changes to said minutes? If hearing none, then the minutes stand approved, and I forget the last word. Yes. Here, you could do a better job.
Yeah,
Thanks,
right on
Heather.
quick. Good morning, or afternoon, I guess. A copy of the treasurer's report is in your packet. Are there any questions? That's what I like to hear. Lori Brooks, would you come up and speak about RPAC?
Okay, hi, I'm here to deliver the RPAC report. The good news is we have met our dollar goal for 2024. That's awesome. That's in part to the ones that have invested this year and also to our major investors. If you are a major investor, could you please stand and be recognized? Thank you very much. Those folks that just stood have pledged to invest more than $1,000 because they believe that our industry is worth fighting for. Now, I'm not asking for everyone to give $1,000. I'm only asking for you to do your fair share. What's your fair share? $15. How easy is it to invest? You can go right onto the Paragon homepage, and at the top left corner, under your links of interest, it says invest in RPAC. You need your NERDS number, you go in, you pop that in, you put your credit card in, $15, and you're invested in RPAC. Now, how many have already invested in RPAC this year? Any dollar amount? Okay? So those of you who did not raise your hand, I need all of you to go back to your offices, do the $15, and I will have met the participation goal that President Tolson has put upon me. We are shooting for Triple Crown again this year. We got it last year. We want it again this year. We want the Outer Banks to be recognized. Why is RPAC important? You've heard me say this before. I've come to many of your offices, and I've spoken to a lot of you directly, and I have my wonderful committee. A few of you are here out there talking to you guys as well. If you don't understand what RPAC is, please come talk to any of us. Talk to the ladies and gentlemen that were up here just a few minutes ago, and they will share with you the importance of RPAC. Guys, this business has been very good to me for the past 20 plus years, and I want it to continue. And without RPAC and without us standing up for our realtor industry, we're not gonna have an industry, or we're gonna be taxed way, way, way more than we already are, okay? So this is an organization that goes and supports realtor issues. It's not about politics, it's not about red, it's not about blue, it's about purple. We are the Purple Party. We fight for realtor party rights, private property rights, and we support candidates that support us. I want to be doing this for the next 20 plus years, and I want everybody else here to be able to do it as well. So thank you very much. Please, please, please invest in RPAC. Right, so those of you who are new in the industry, you may not know, or those of you that have been doing it for a long time but never paid it, we were supposed to be paying a privilege license tax. How many know what the privilege license tax is? Every hand should go up or the Department of Revenue is gonna be looking at you. Anyway, you don't have to pay that anymore, and you know why? Because NC Realtors lobbied against it, okay? We said this is a stupid tax. It's $50 that just went nowhere, and so we don't have to pay that anymore, right? So I'm only asking for 15 of that. You can keep the other 35, or if you want to give me all the 50, that's fine too. I'm happy to take that as well. But these are just a few of the things. What about septics at the beginning of the year? Remember we had the general membership meeting and we stood here and we were like, oh my gosh, this septic thing is crazy. We were talking about going to, instead of replacing the septic, we had to go to a drain field that was going to cost $60,000+ and really put some of our homeowners in a jam. We lobbied against that. Guess what? It got repealed. We didn't get everything we want, but we got the bulk of it, which is the main thing. Yes, clap, that's big. It's big for our area. These guys in Raleigh and even here at the local level, they have no idea what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's our job to get in front of them and tell them what that is. And your participation and your dollars do just that. So remember that. This is the cheapest thing that you can invest in your business. It is important for us to have a seat at the table. I'm very passionate about this. If you have any questions or you want to, what's the right word I'm looking for? Challenge me on why this is important, come talk to me. I'm happy to share why it's important. I need 46, that's why I said, every one of you that had your hands down when I said who invested, that's about 40 plus of you. If every one of you went back to your offices and invested today, I'd hit my goal and President Tolson would be very happy with me, okay? So thank you very much, y'all have a great day.
Hello, everyone. I am Tammy Aycock. I am the co-chair of the 27th Annual OBAR Surf Fishing Tournament this year. And there should be some flyers on your tables, and we are looking for teams. We are just getting ready to end our early bird special, which ends the end of this month, which will save you $100 per team. It's going to be on Friday, October the 4th. Fishing's going to be from 6:30 to 12:30 this year, and then we're going to have an awards ceremony and lunch at the Village Beach Club. We also have our Yeti pre-raffle prize out here, so buy your raffle tickets. Christy?
Hey everybody, I am your CYA chairperson, which was formerly known Realtor Fest. First off, the committee has been working very, very hard to create an amazing event that will occur on November the 14th. Registration is open, so register because space is limited. It will be at the Hilton Ballroom, so you want to get the early bird special, and you want to be there because we're going to have Lee Brown and other hot topics. So of what's happening. Has the dust settled yet? It's a hot topic. And paving the broken road to short-term rentals to closings. Also, we're going to be talking scams. There's going to be panels. There's going to be all kinds of stuff. November the 14th, Hilton Ballroom from 1 to 4, and then there will be a private VIP reception. So anyway, register. We're looking for sponsors. So if you're interested in sponsoring, please go on, let us know. Hats off to this committee. This committee has worked beyond any expectation. They've worked hard for you guys. So please participate. This is an amazing event, and it is brought to you by the association to give benefits. So see you there.
Okay, everybody. When you came in, we put together something easy peasy for you. It's a list of our upcoming events starting in September. And I just wanted to review because September is a big month for the association. It's when we open the leadership candidate application. So if you've ever thought of serving on the board, you can look in our policy manual right on the website, Policy Manual A, as far as criteria before the actual applications go out. You must have served on a committee or on the board in the last 7 years. And then it starts from there. So, and then there's other criteria with regards to president-elect seat is open, treasurer, secretary, our property management director, and there will be 3 board seats open. So consider serving on the board of directors. It's a great way to, actually the folks that I know that have served on the board said it just definitely has helped their business. Our 2025 committee drive opens in September. Please consider serving on a committee. The committee is what makes everything work, going to the board with requests from the committee. We'll be looking for a Career Achievement Award nominations and also Realtor of the Year. Our Career Achievement Award is presented at our annual meeting, and as you can see, that's going to be on October 24th, and it will be here at Captain George's. Our Realtor of the Year is going to be awarded at our Realtor Ball. This is President-elect Christie's party, so to speak. Richard had his last year at the Hilton, but Christy Bryant will have hers at the Hilton Garden Inn Ballroom this year on December 6th. Mark your calendars for that. We are offering all kinds of CE and professional development opportunities. By way of Chair J.P. Perrone on the Education Committee and all of the Education Committee members, we are, and approval that you did last year for the budget for this year was free CE. It will be offered by way of Zoom September 24th, 25th, and 26th. Our elective is already at capacity at over 100. There may be some people that cancel their registration, but we have 107 people registered for that class. We have 91 registered for the Bic Up and 79 for the Gen Up. So it's filling up fast. We're stopping at 100. So if you want free CE, that's $70 right there in your dues that we put forth towards your CE training. We also have, and also that elective that Stephanie Walker will be teaching, Risky Business, Doing It Right, also counts toward Code of Ethics training. When I sent out the acronym email to all BICs, I said, come on, BICs. We've got over 400 members that have not had their Code of Ethics training in the last 3 years, and the deadline is this year. So what happens in the office is Karen, Membership Services Liaison, is contacting members to see if they have taken it, have they sent us our certificate, and what happens if we don't have it on file that you've taken Code of Ethics training is by March of next year, your membership could be dropped. You have got to have Code of Ethics training. Just a heads up for next year, it will be required of all members in the same 3-year cycle with Code of Ethics training. You will have to complete Fairhaven. Fairhaven is an hour, to get through to just make you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and fair housing. So that will be a requirement next year in the Code of Ethics cycle that starts January 1. Looking at what we've got October 8th and 9th, everybody in here, you're showing up, you're participating. You should sign up for the in-person free accredited buyer's representative course. Get that ABR designation. This is the first step, and we're offering it to you for free. It's a $295 course. Stephanie Walker will be teaching that. We did have on the flyers that it would be held at the OBAR office. We're partnering with the Albemarle Association of Realtors on this event, and so it looks like we may be moving it to either the Ramada or the Comfort Inn. Depending upon availability. So you can see what's coming up. We are offering free, we are offering CE. It will not be free. It will probably be more about $60, $65 per class. And that will be at the Hilton. Registration is not open for that yet. And as you can see, CYA Summit, we're very, very excited about this. 4 sessions, all interactive, 1 to 5, 5 to 6:30 VIP reception for attendees, our sponsors, and others involved in this event. It is going to be a signature event for OBAR. So we should all be worried about CYA covering your assets. So and navigating this new era of real estate and protecting you. And I think with that, in looking at how we're going to be navigating in 3 months from now, look at the poster, sign up. Everything takes you, the QR code takes you to our website. You can see all these exciting things that we have to offer you. And now we've got a panel discussion, which I'm sure we're all interested in. And I'm going to pull up Heather Sisk, will be joining us from NC Realtors. She's an attorney with NC Realtors. NC Realtors has provided opportunities on their YouTube channel with videos about the forms. But I'd like to call Richard Hess. He's on our board of directors and serves on the MLS committee. I'd like to call Richard Tolson up, our president. I would like to call Tammy Aycock, who is your MLS committee chair, up here. And I've got Dan Sutherland as our MLS director. We might need Dan the man for some backup here. And Stephanie Walker definitely needs to be up here. She left. She got flowers. She's out of here. Stephanie Walker, as serving in the capacity of an NAR director on the NAR leadership team, definitely needs to be up here and part of this conversation. We've broken it out a little bit on the agenda with regards to topics. So we'll start. So this is not just like a and a free-for-all of what we're doing, but we would like to have some organization to this. So Richard, I'm going to turn on the Zoom with Heather. In case you didn't know, Benny Baldwin, thank you very much for being here and recording this. We're professionally recorded today and with sound, so that for those that didn't make it can watch this if they were unable to be here today. So, Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you to begin the discussion. And there's some topics that we talked about. We know we've had a lot of questions in the office, a lot of questions to Dan, MLS, Tammy Aycock, committee chairs fielded a ton of questions. So to start it off, we're here because we opted into the settlement agreement to protect all of you. And Stephanie can probably follow up on that.
That's right. Thank you, Willow. So why are we here? Absolutely. We are here because we opted into the settlement agreement. From the beginning, the litigation that we were facing, and then the settlement that we decided to agree to, we basically had two goals. And one was to secure a release of liability for as many of our members, associations, and MLSs as we could, and to preserve the choices consumers have regarding real estate services and compensation. And opting into this settlement allowed us to achieve both of those goals. So with the key terms, and I'm not going to, trust me, I'm not going to recite the terms of the settlement, but the release of the liability was the primary one. So the NAR, and we would have probably incurred many years of litigation and a cost that was, we couldn't absorb. So it made a lot of sense to do that. What does it do? Compensation offers are moved off the MLS. We all know that. However, we're still able to preserve offers of compensation. Written agreements for MLS participants acting for buyers. We kind of been practicing that for a while. A lot of us, I won't say all of us, but a lot of us have generally, we've acted on oral agreements. We talk to buyers about working with real estate agents, the different options available in terms of agency and how we get paid. So we just now need to put that in writing when we first start working with buyers and touring homes. The settlement payment, it would have been huge if we didn't agree, but we agreed to pay $418 million. Your dues are not going up in 2024, and again, they're not going up in 2025, but we're pretty sure at some point we'll see some dues increases. And the most important thing is NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing. So we've got some settlement practices that we need to start dealing with, but we can continue to offer compensation. So that's kind of what the settlement is in a nutshell. I'm just going to kind of give a brief synopsis of probably why we're kind of in this position. you know, it has very much to do with the offer of compensation. And, you know, if you think about it, when we go and we meet, and this is just my personal opinion, this isn't OBAR talking or anything like that, but when we sit down and we discuss listing a property with a seller, you know, we get into all the things that we're going to do, and we talk about our commission, our fee, and generally, you know, we get an agreement, and then that agent agrees to offer compensation to a buyer's agent. And I think the settlement, in their mind, in their eyes, they kind of felt like that seller maybe didn't quite have a say in what that compensation might have been to an agent. They just know that they're agreeing to a fee, and it goes on from there. Likewise, on the buyer side, you know, a buyer reaches out to an agent for professional representation. And, you know, we explain what agency is and how we get paid, but, you know, offers of compensations are made. The buyer feels good that they don't have to pay anything, but at the same time, they're hiring a professional to represent them, and they really don't have any say in what that fee might be. And so just playing the devil's advocate, that's a little bit of what the lawsuit was all about, you know. And in other words, you know, we know that we have free market capitalism, and we want the markets to kind of, you know, reflect what the fees and things are, and that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to let the markets determine what those fees are going to be. We all know that we bring tremendous value to the table. We've always, you know, represented our clients to the best of our ability, and we've been paid in the end. And we're going to continue to be able to do that. We're just going to have to, you know, learn these new practices and kind of follow the rules so we stay out of trouble. It's not that difficult. It's something that we've been doing for years, and we're just going to have to, you know, continue on with that. So that's about all I've got for opening statements. Wasn't quite sure how we were going to handle this, but should we open up with questions, or what do you guys think? Oh, and we also have Heather Sisk with us too. Hey, Heather, how you doing? All right, so well, I guess we'll kind of open up with some questions. And show of a hand, if you have a question, please stand up. We'll try to repeat the question so everybody knows what it is.
While you get your courage up, one thing I want to clarify, this lawsuit was brought in a state that did not have buyer agency. And just so everybody understands, only 19 states in the country had buyer agency prior to this lawsuit, and North Carolina was one of them. So we have to think of the perspective from the lawsuit. 31 states, they didn't have buyer agency. And so people did not know what was going on. They didn't know where the money was going or who was paying what or who was being represented clearly. North Carolina has been very clear for, I guess, 20 years or so, where we've disclosed what the total commission is and that the listing agent is sharing their compensation with the buyer's agent and how much that is. And it's a little ironic to me that we're clarifying something that was never the law in North Carolina. It was always negotiable, and it was clearly spelled out. So keep in mind that the perspective for the majority of the country is a lot different than it is here, but the lawsuit was national, and that's why we're all in it.
Yeah, so what Richard was saying about so few of the states that had buyer agency is absolutely right. I happened to be in Kentucky when the settlement was announced, and I was doing 5 different boards in the state of Kentucky. They had never used a buyer agency agreement. Imagine if that's how we'd been doing our business, how scary this whole thing would be. You guys, we are so fortunate that we've had the disclosure requirements that we've had for as long as we've had them. And so while it's different, the transition for us is so much easier than it's going to be for a whole lot of other states, because we're really not doing anything different. Yeah, you have to have an agreement to show a house now. We kind of had to have these conversations before we did that anyway. Now we just have to have it in writing. So not a terribly huge problem.
Heather, can you hear us?
everything everyone said so far is absolutely right. We are only one of a handful of states who have already implemented buyer agency agreements before the settlement. So we are in a really, really good spot. So that should make you guys feel a little more comfortable with these changes. I know it's a lot of information at one time, but I'm happy to be a resource for all of you. And if you have even after, I will give you my email address and you can ask me anything you come up with.
Thank you, Heather. Did Elizabeth Cloninger have a question? The question is, there's been different interpretations as to whether or not compensation is a concession.
Or is concession compensation?
Or, sorry, it's concession compensation. Well, the answer is yes, concessions can be compensation. In other words, one of the things that we are permitted to leave in the MLS are concessions to buyers. And it's perfectly allowable for a buyer to receive a closing cost concession, and with that concession, they can pay compensation to a buyer's agent. And the important thing there is, being that it's a concession to the buyer has control of that money, not the agent. Therefore, the buyer, being a concession, they can use that money however they see fit. They could buy down points on a mortgage. They can pay closing costs. They can apply it to repairs, and they can compensate their buyer's agent.
Do we want to weigh in from Heather there? Heather, did you hear the question with regards to compensation versus concession?
Yeah, so my understanding of that is that you can list concessions in MLS, but you cannot limit those concessions to an agent's commissions being paid, if that makes sense. And you cannot condition those concessions on that.
Correct. So you cannot, as far as any concessions, you cannot put a percentage sign in concessions. They can be used for repairs, closing costs, etc., as long as it is not conditioned upon a buyer's agent's compensation. So. Okay, in the back.
So my question is, lenders will only let your concessions be 2% on an investment property. That, I mean, what I'm running up against is that buyers don't want to pay. You know, and it's hard to get through the buyer's agency agreement with people you haven't ever met that are coming into town. And the buyer's agency agreement doesn't address how we can negotiate that. Am I right about that? Like how we can do concessions? Like that's not really addressed in the new buyer's agency agreement, or have I missed it?
So first she brought up about lending and the limits on lending for investment properties, yes, versus second homes versus, they're different as far as lenders, what can be put in concessions. And then in working with new buyers, in understanding the whole buyer agency agreement, whether it's 1 week, 3 weeks, 2 years, whatever, buyer's agency agreement, whether you're gonna have a non-agency agreement, et cetera, in working through that. And I think, Richard, you talked earlier about your value. You know, you have to understand your value and what you're bringing to the table. You're not working for free. You are a realtor and have extreme value in helping someone with their home purchase. But Stephanie, you wanna?
I'm handing off to Tammy first. So I just wanted to speak to how you explain the fee to your buyer. There is a sentence that is right there that says that the buyer's agent does have the right to seek the compensation from the seller. So it's very clear in that agreement that Of course, that's probably going to be your first route, right? Is to ask the seller for compensation via 220 form.
Tricia, I think you work with a lot of high-end buyers. So in those jumbo mortgages, yes, they may only allow for 2% concessions. On some, it depends on the actual loan itself. In some cases, concessions are allowed up to 6% on some loans. And in other cases, it might be 3%. And I believe FHA is 4%. So it does depend on the buyer, the type of loan that they're getting, and in that scenario. I'm just going to say something, and again, every brokerage needs to conduct the business on how they choose. But again, like a lot of us have done in the past, we've talked about working with real estate agents. We've had an oral agreement that we're going to proceed under buyer agency. May I suggest that you take a good look at the non-exclusive buyer agency agreement. In that agreement, basically you do form an agency agreement. You also have the ability to put in there what you expect to receive in the transaction. And it does state that you will seek your commission from the seller or the listing agent's offer of compensation. It does not bind a buyer to paying you a buyer agency fee. And because it's non-exclusive, at any time you can enter into an exclusive agency agreement. So it's really a good vehicle to use. And keep in mind that you can limit the scope of an agency agreement. You can tie it specifically to a property. You can tie it to a specific area. You have to learn how to articulate that to your buyer, that there are many different ways that, one, you can be paid, and two, you can proceed much like you would in a oral buyer agency under the non-exclusive. So if you haven't looked at the non-exclusive agency agreement, I recommend you do that.
And I will follow up and say that most, like Fannie and Freddie right now, will allow for a seller concession. They will also allow for a buyer agent's commission, and it's separate from that concession amount.
They just changed that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Just changed it today.
And yeah, so it brand new, hot off the press. They've been talking about it for a while.
It's funny, I just got an email this morning from Fannie Mae that said, we're not changing anything. We're going to pay buyer's agents like we always have. Freddie Mac sent me an email that said that they interpreted the legal lawsuit that they were no longer allowed to pay buyer agents commissions.
They're wrong.
But they're wrong about that. But they would up front say that they'll pay concessions, and made it perfectly clear that that's what it was for. And so there's nothing's really going to change. That was just a kind of an interpretation, which is wrong on their part. So, but Fannie Mae understood the importance of still offering buyer agent compensation. Another thing, as far as Tricia, as far as the forms go, and I think NC Realtors would back me up, they're all going to change for next year because this thing happened so fast. Can you imagine? Stephanie was talking about states having to come up with all these forms. So even just in North Carolina, making the small changes just to get where we were in such a compressed amount of time, I expect you're going to see a lot more clarification, especially as things kind of settle out this year. I know the Forms Committee is anybody in here on the Forms Committee? Laura, you still on it? It's going to be working extremely hard coming up. I think that's definitely going to happen. I think Stephanie would probably agree with that too.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we, once again, members of the Realtor organization, these are Realtor forms. And folks, can you imagine trying to navigate this without all of the work and all of the forms that are available to us? And stay out of jail.
Had a clarification, or looking for clarification on the compensation considered field in the MLS. So I know we said that it could be used for to pay buyer agents commissions.
Up close.
Concessions field, not compensation.
Concessions, correct. That would be if a seller is considering concession that a buyer could be using to pay to wherever they decide. If the compensation being offered is coming from the listing firm and being offered to the buyer's firm under cooperative compensation, would that be considered the seller considering a concession?
No, because that comes, what you're talking about comes from the listing firm, not the seller. So seller, you can't have anything in MLS that talks about any kind of compensation, just concession. It's the key.
Okay. Cool. And just for clarification, is there any guidance on what is being quote unquote considered? I mean, I know, shoot, if I was getting $500,000 over asking, I would consider offering a $100 concession. Is that, is there a line being drawn on what's considered a concession or not? Or is we essentially always checking yes?
Well, again, concessions are paid to the buyer. So the buyer can use those concessions how they see fit. Buyer agency, closing costs, buy downs, buyer agency compensation. So they can do that. That's the important thing. Those funds are in the control of the buyer, and therefore it's a concession.
Yeah, the best way to handle this is go old school. And so I followed all those emeritus people just a couple years behind them. And y'all, pick up the phone, call somebody, ask the question, send an email, send a text. You guys need to do this. Don't rely on the information that is no longer going to be there for you in MLS, right? You can take, if it says concession and it's yes, don't take that to mean that that is your compensation, right? We've got to, it's time for us to grow up and be professionals and go about this in a very professional manner and go ahead and make those calls and understand what's available to you and maybe what's not, because that's also an incredibly important conversation to have with your buyer client.
100% agree. 100% agree. I guess the clarification. Sorry. I guess the clarification that we were looking for is acting on our seller's client's best interest. We're going to have this field that everybody else can see that says that some seller is considering concessions. Now, I think if somebody was looking at one property, giving all things considered equivalent, one property that clicked in the MLS saying, yes, these concessions are considered, and the other one saying no, concessions are not considered, regardless of if we're looking for compensation or whatever, just assuming like, hey, this person's offering $500 in concession or something, if that's what they're thinking of, would it not behoove us to always check yes in that regard?
Well, it's going to be the decision of the seller client as to whether concessions are being offered or not. I think it's important to remember that
Richard, just with regards to the association and what is in our fields in the MLS, antitrust, et cetera, we are not endorsing any field to be construed as an offer, an opportunity to offer compensation. So it wouldn't behoove any of us to do anything in that field other than to look at what is being offered to the buyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Just wanted to clarify that just for antitrust purposes.
And I would say that the fact that a seller will consider concessions is not bound. In other words, when you say that you're considering concessions, you're not saying that you're definitely going to do something. It's all going to depend on the offer. So to strike up that conversation with the listing agent early on is important. But keep in mind that before you even go out there and you're really going after properties to show a potential buyer, you're going to sit down with that buyer and you're going to have that conversation about what your fees are and what your duties are going to be. So you've kind of, already hit that before you even get out there and start looking at properties.
So I have two things real quick. So I think like I've heard on Facebook, people were assuming that if that check was not yes, that meant no compensation was offered. And that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah,
And I know that. I'm just saying there's a lot of misunderstanding going on. And so it's going to eliminate, in some agents' minds, wanting to show that property when in fact, my listings have commission.
Y'all
not
realize that's
concessions.
why we got sued.
So I understand that, but I'm just saying there's a lot of confusion on what that box means, was number one. My other question was, because a buyer is in control of a concession, what protection do I have if a buyer gets disgruntled towards the end and decides, you know what, I don't want to pay you? What protection do I have? I have a buyer's agency agreement, but how hard is that to enforce?
Okay, so okay. So first of all, that's a contract. You send it to the attorney. But the one thing that I like right before your question, the one thing I really, really want to make clear to you all is that concession field has absolutely nothing to do with compensation. If you think that it does, and if you think that is because it's checked that you're going to get paid, you're going to do a lot of work for free, right? It is upon you to figure that out. It is also, I would follow up and say, if that box is not checked, or if it doesn't say yes, or if it doesn't say anything, and you think that that means that there's no compensation, then you're doing a disservice to your buyer. Okay? You guys, we need to show the buyers the properties that match what they want to see. And yeah, we're going to have to do a little extra work trying to figure this stuff out, but don't read more into it than is there. So, yeah.
And I just want to add one thing. If there are no concessions being offered, you still have the ability to put together an offer and ask for concessions. All right? It doesn't mean you can't ask for concessions if it's not something that's checked.
Sure. I think the clarification is that understanding that that's not a field for compensation, trying to come up with a scenario in which we would check no. It sounds like at any point, any seller would consider concessions. So we're just trying to figure out a time where it sounds like this box is always going to be checked yes.
So Heather, the question is the concern about the concessions field and the assumption being made, well, if concessions is checked, then that means the seller is willing to offer something to the buyer that may in turn be used to pay the buyer's agent. Why wouldn't every seller just check concessions? Why would that field not be checked? And so the panel has said, well, no, not necessarily. That field, doesn't mean compensation to the buyer's agent. But, as far as how someone's going to interpret that, they should not take that for granted that just because it's checked. And I think the question is, when will it ever be checked? No. And I think we've already seen in some cases that, yes, a seller may say, no, I'm not offering concessions.
Right.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go back to what Stephanie said. So, sorry, Stephanie. So the basis of these guidelines, the basis of the settlement itself, is for all realtors to be as transparent as possible, right? So your role in this is to, okay, you have a buyer or a seller in front of you. Your role is to go through these forms, explain everything to them, never assume. So when you are talking to your buyer or seller, you need to be as transparent as possible. You need to make sure you communicate, and that's with the other agent, so buyer or seller's agent, whichever side you are on. Just make sure that you are as transparent as possible, and that will eliminate any of these questions. Now, another thing, and I can't remember who said this. Right now, we're at the very beginning of this. Our forms committee met all year last year, and I can't even tell you. Every meeting was just like, they lasted at least like 6 or 7 hours, every single meeting. So, with that being said, all of these changes that were made were made with an idea of how things would happen. So it's possible that there are some kinks. in the forms. So with that in mind, when you're going through the forms, just think about like what questions could come up from this. How can I avoid that? Now, another resource that you guys have, especially for the forms, and this is a great resource, and if I were in your position, I would be using it as much as I possibly could. So we have a legal hotline, and I don't know if anybody in this room has ever used the legal hotline, but it's a great resource. I will give you all the number. John Waite runs our legal hotline most of the time. Some other attorneys in his firm help, but he is in charge of our forms committee, and he has helped draft every single one of these forms. So if anything ever comes up like that, where you have a specific question about what should I be doing, is there a scenario that could come up from this? When should this be checked? When shouldn't it be checked? When can I expect it to be? Definitely reach out to John or anybody else at his firm, because they can answer those questions, and they are certainly a great resource for you and a big benefit to being a realtor. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I do think transparency and just being open to asking questions throughout the process is a good way to approach those situations.
Heather, I also want to add, on the tables, there is a QR code for Realtor Partner Benefits. I think if you scan that, I think the legal hotline comes up. Maurice Brown was our guest speaker back in April and went over a lot of realtor benefits for you. You have that. You have the tech helpline. Legal hotline, definitely a good resource. Other resources, free. Yep. We put together through the MLS committee and with Tammy Acock, Maslin Seal put together this broker beach bag. It had great information in it. Last page, talking about the CYA Summit, make plans to attend, goes over buyer agency, buyer agreement 101. Great resource. In there it says you can't put anything in showing time. That's seems to be one of the biggest questions we get. Also, Heather, on when the forms were released July 1, NCR, John Waite, has done a great job with the YouTube channel. Did you know there's all kinds of videos on the YouTube channel with NC Realtors? Just go to YouTube, NC Realtors. Go to YouTube, look up NC Realtors, and I just rewatched the 13-minute video on the cooperating compensation agreement. So just to to be more aware. So you have those resources available to you that you can share in sales meetings and with other agents. So yeah, there's a lot out there as far as resources. And Dan?
Well, NC Realtors also has legal Q&As on their legal page. I've got examples here. These are the questions that have been asked of their legal hotline, and they've answered them. And one of the questions that came up, I'm going to kind of change gears here, but one of the questions that came up in the MLS committee yesterday was, does the Zillow touring agreement comply with the MLS rules and license law of the state of North Carolina? And the answer is yes. It's been vetted by the commission and by the NC Realtors.
You're going to need the one that says North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so I've compiled all three of those last legal Q&As with regards to the forms and buyer agency agreements, and I was going to send those to all attendees in one PDF. So we did send out to all the brokers in charge one of the Q&As that we said, hey, this was just released from NC Realtors. You might not have seen this email. And so I did get a lot of responses saying thanks for sending that, because no, they did miss it in their email. So I'll be sending that out as the three latest Q&As on all that out to everyone that's registered today. I'll probably just send it out to the entire membership. So,
What should they check? What is the thing that we want them to check as far as the firm paying or the seller paying? Which one is the best one to check?
It depends on your company's policy.
Well,
Okay. Well, just answer that question, and I say, just answer the question.
the bottom line answer to that is if you have a listing agreement where you have cooperative compensation as part of your listing agreement, you would always check the listing firm is paying that. If the seller says, I'm not paying commission, then you don't do anything until somebody asks for it, and then the seller would sign and check the box at that time. Or if like some companies have a policy where they don't offer other agent compensation, so in those firms, it would only offer to the listing agent, and then the seller would sign that form offering it. But if your regular listing agreement, as it states now, says that your firm is offering cooperative compensation, you would always check listing firm.
So, okay, so what we're used to being using with it, paying for the buyer's agent too,
Listing firm.
is you check listing firm.
Yes.
Okay, and then you're telling me if he says no, I'm not going to pay any commission, then you couldn't check anything at that point.
That's correct.
If he just says I'm paying your
No.
commission, then just you as a listing agent, then what? You would just hit seller.
The seller, when the seller signs that form, they're kind of think of it this way: they're generating it, so they've been asked to pay compensation if they're not, or if they say, if your company policy was you want the seller to pay the compensation, then they would check that box and sign it. Another, just for John Waite, he also, for anybody's members of regional MLS, they had a good Zoom meeting last week, which is a recording on their website, and he talked for about 45 minutes, and people emailed questions in, which he answered about some stuff, and if you go to ncrmls.com, and there's a tab at the top that says settlement, you can watch that recording. It's about an hour, almost an hour and a half long for the whole thing, but he does more of a, I like it because it's more of a live discussion because people emailed him questions in to ask about things like Form 220, and he goes over a lot of those details.
Okay, and one other question. With the listings you already have, and they have already agreed to pay the commission to both buyer's agent and seller's agent, then when we get an offer, we just send that 220 and we check the firm.
Correct.
Okay.
There was a directive that all agency agreements, whether they be a buyer agency agreement or an exclusive right to sell, be amended with this new compensation disclosure. Only if they were before the settlement date. So any agreements that you had signed prior to the settlement date, you should have already amended those to include this new compensation disclosure statement.
What is that amendment number? Do you know?
It is not. There is not one. They circulated in an email. If any of you guys don't have it, just text me or call me, and I'll be happy to share it with you. Is it now?
7:15.
Now 7:15. Yep.
All right, Elizabeth Cloninger, I saw your hand up here. Here you go.
Thank you. For those who would like the legal hotline phone number, get your pen out. It's 336-294-1415. And that is the legal hotline number if you have a question about your forms. Second thing, I'd like to go back to Tammy Russell's question, her second question about if you get a concession for the buyer from the seller to be paid to the buyer, which was your compensation, and the buyer changes their mind. You say, well, that's a part of the contract. Is the attorney's office paying you at closing from that concession? Or is the buyer striking you a check?
What does the
And
Form
Kraus
220 say?
Gray or Kraus
What does
or-
your Form 220 say?
Well, I don't have a Form 220 because that's saying.
Why don't you have a Form 220?
Well, I'm asking. That's why I'm putting myself
If
up
you
in
don't
front of
have a
everybody
Form
right
220,
now.
then how do you know who's paying
So
you?
you would have a seller.
The buyer agreed to pay. So that would be a Kraus question.
Yeah. So Kraus, where are you?
Elizabeth, by that point, let's just say by that point, you should have had a buyer agency agreement in place, which spells out what your compensation is. So you have a contract with the buyer about your fee as well.
So you have a concession. You wrote an offer to purchase, asking for the seller to make a concession in the amount, whatever the percentage or amount that you're asking for as your compensation. Then you send Form 220. Seller agrees to pay this amount at closing to the attorney's office. Is that how you're saying the process is? Okay. Okay, Kraus.
I would say yes, but Kraus will answer that.
I don't know that I need this, but you have to remember it's a matter of contract, and the attorney needs to know what the contract terms are. So I would recommend that you send to the attorney when you send in the worksheet plus a copy of the base contract between the parties, the compensation agreement, so we know what it is. What each of you needs to understand, that's merely a contract between the seller and their agent and the buyer and their agent. And if for any reason those parties, the seller or the buyer, instruct the attorney not to pay, then frankly, it can't be paid. And then it's a lawsuit. You have a contract and you have rights under your contract, but that's all you have. This man right here. Because I litigated one for him. But my point is that it's no different than any other contract. The seller can breach the deal and not convey to the buyer. What happens? Buyer has rights. They can sue for specific performance. Same thing you, the agents, can do. You have a contract with your buyer or you have a contract with your seller. And that's who you have to go after for that compensation if, that's the if, they direct that you not be paid at closing. And it has happened. I can assure you it has happened. And then the agencies, listing agency, the selling agency, have to make a business decision. Is it economically viable to enter into that litigation? And you make the business decision like anybody else when somebody breaches a deal.
I'm going to go to Al first. He was over here, then we'll get back over to that side.
Oh, I can speak up. Not a question, but an observation and a comment. To piggyback off what Stephanie mentioned earlier, where we have to go old school again. And not only in terms of calling other realtors to ascertain correct information, but maybe more importantly, to make phone calls. I mean, most of our business is handled electronically these days. Everything's signed digitally. Most of our clients, buyers, sellers, are not in the area. They don't live here. So all the more important for making sure there is good understanding on everybody's part about what's taking place with this paperwork is find, as my pal David over here said earlier, find a phone booth and call the sellers and buyers when you're ready to send out a listing agreement or ready to send out a contract or whatever, and make sure that you explain and don't just assume that they're going to know what to do. Make sure you explain what the documentation means, make sure they have a good understanding of it, and then back that up with documenting that conversation that you had. Send them an email. Here's the conversation that we had. This is what has to happen.
Thank you, Al. I'm going to go to David here.
2 points. The first one is I think this is going to continue to evolve, and I think we're going to end up with a touring agreement for somebody we meet today that doesn't want to marry us. They just want to see a damn house. So there's going to be what I'll call a short form touring agreement. It's already in the works. I've seen some of the NAR writings about it, and I think people are after it, and I think it's going to evolve. But beyond that, when you're writing a buyer agency agreement, it would probably behoove you to hire some attorney. To write that as if you can sell that buyer anything, and I've done it before, and it's very powerful. You're riding down the road and they say, I'd like to have a house like that. And it doesn't have a for sale sign on it. It's not an MLS. Filled out properly, you pull into the driveway, knock on the door and say, I got buyers in my car that want to buy your house. You don't even have to discuss compensation because it's already written out in your buyer agency agreement. It's extremely powerful. So if you do your hard work on the front end, all of this will be taken care of by the time you're ready to write an offer on a specific property.
Thank you. I'm going to move up to this side. I'm coming back over there. But good point, David. You have to know your value.
So my question is, there were some conversations that we had after a meeting, and there was some discussion about it lessening your liability instead of continuing to do things the way we have done them with our listing agreements, and have the seller sign that they'll pay the commission direct, that's less liability on us in the future. And I didn't know if Kraus could speak to that. And then also something about not having the 220 form not signed for some reason. That was supposed to be less liability. I don't know who can speak to that, Kraus or.
So I would say, I'll let Stephanie after me, but I would say it's your firm, whatever your firm's
Hold it up.
policy is. You have to review what your liabilities your company is willing to take on. Our company may do something totally different than your company's going to do. I mean, I think my point of view is that how can you send a Form 220 signed when you don't know what the offer is? The compensation is based on what the offer is. So, you know.
Kraus, Heather want to chime in on that? Heather, did you get that question? No. Okay. Say that again, Stephanie, and speak into the
Okay, so it was discussed that it's better to have the Form 220 not signed when we send it to agents, and that it also may be recommended that instead of keeping things business as usual, that we discuss with our sellers that we want the one commission, and as the listing agent, I'm going to offer to pay a co-broke commission, and this is how much it is, and everything signed. That it's less liability on us as agents if we recommend that our seller pay it directly, rather than we do it the way we've been doing things for so many years for whatever reason. I'm personally of the opinion if somebody's going to sue you, they're going to sue you, and every attorney will tell you that a contract's made to be broken. So that's why I was asking if Kraus had any opinion on if it reduces our liability to do it one way versus the other, and sending the form out unsigned. Because to me, what is an unsigned form? It accomplishes nothing.
Now, as far as the liability goes, I think at this point we don't really know. I don't think we know how that would affect liability at this point. And again, I think it was Tammy that said this. Those kind of things are going to be different for each firm. So I would definitely check with your firm and make sure there's not a particular way they are doing it. Well, I am that firm. I personally would not send a form that's not signed. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay, Stephanie just reiterated that she is her own firm, so that's where she's come from. Kraus, do you have anything to add there?
I totally agree. Sending a form that is not signed, I think, is just flat out dumb. I mean, no other way to phrase it from my end. Most of you don't know me. I'm blunt. I think doing that is just stupid. What does it do? Get it signed. 2, the determination of whether you increase your liability if you contract with the seller, that the seller's going to directly pay the commission instead of it coming from your commission as a co-broking commission, I don't think makes any difference in all candor. If it's not paid, it's not paid. And because remember, who's the contract with? Think about it always from contract provisions. Who does that buyer have a contract with? Who does the selling agent have a contract with? And that's who is liable, period. Are you the agent's going to get drug in? Yeah. I mean, we all recognize that. But whether you have actual liability is a whole different ballgame. It just depends on your contract between the parties.
So Heather, wasn't there a legal Q&A that talked about not automatically sending a signed 220 in case there was a buyer who had non-exclusive contracts with more than one agent because then because multiple agents could then say procuring cause. I know. But there's some really weird language that says when the commission is earned. And so I think that's where some of this confusion's coming from.
Hey, Stephanie, that is actually in the video with John Waite on the Form 220. There's a difference between earned and payable. When it's signed, it's earned, but it's not payable until you get to closing. So there's a difference. And don't think that just because it's signed and then something happens, you don't go to contract, that you get paid. That's not true. You've earned it, but you don't get paid. So, yeah.
Real quickly, going back to this, don't send a form if it's not signed theory. To me, that concession box is ridiculous, and we should get rid of it.
Okay, based on applause. I've got the time as almost 1:25. We can take a couple more questions or wrap it up with a panel. What do you guys have been here since 11:30. So we're going to wrap it up. All right, we're going to wrap it up. I think, lots of things. I'm going to go through the panelists and let them say some final words. Heather, let's start with Heather. Anything, Heather, with closing this out?
So, Willow sent me a few questions, and I want to answer those because you guys you may have these questions later and you just haven't thought about them yet. So I just want to address those. So her first question was about showing time. So you are not allowed to list commissions in MLS, as you are aware. Showing time, from what I understand, you are also not allowed to list commissions. Now, I think a few people were asking if you could list the commissions in the showing time messenger.
The question was, we were asked if you're using showing time messaging service, which is private, that it's not a field in showing time with the email that we just got a few days ago. The debate was, if you're using it as a messaging service, which nobody else sees, then can you communicate compensation through that messaging service?
So I don't know what showing time's policy is on that, and I think Willow asked them.
I have not gotten a response.
You have?
No, I have not.
Oh, you haven't gotten a response. Okay. I would say no. I would stick to your principle of just communicating directly. You have text messaging. I think Stephanie said this again. You have text messaging. You can call each other. I would stick to that before I did anything with showing time, since they've already said that you cannot list compensation in there.
Correct. It can't be in a field. It can't be in an attachment. We've been asked, well, I'll just attach the docs and there it'll show it in there. Well, no. Okay. And then my second one was a good one, that we've been asked about an outside entity that may be organized for the purpose of allowing agents to go to this outside entity and then look up what the compensation is from a seller.
Okay, so I've gotten this question a lot too, and there is not a straightforward answer for this one yet. Mainly because at this point, the only rule is against listing commissions in MLS. So that is the only thing that you cannot do right now. Now, that's not to say that later on lawsuits may or may not pop up. So again, my suggestion to you all would be just to communicate with each other. Try to talk to each other directly. At this point, though, you can do that. You can list them anywhere else but MLS and, of course, Showtime.
Michael Ketchmark, we just did an interview with Inman, and he was the plaintiff's attorney. And he said, if you try to do a workaround, we will find you. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie. Yep.
Can I say one more thing? Okay. Another I thought that may come up later with that exact quote that you just shared. Our forms are not a workaround. Our forms have been designed to help you guys make sure that you meet all of the requirements. And they are there to help facilitate these conversations too, not to avoid the conversations. So do not feel like if you are using the forms, you're doing some kind of weird workaround thing and trying to get away from the requirements of the settlement. So
Okay, we're going to turn it over to the panel, and I think I shared with folks coming in the office, and here I was sitting in a meeting in March with an association executives conference, and they announced at 8 o'clock in the morning that, hey, we've reached a settlement agreement. And every association executive in the room like, oh my goodness. What do we do now? And so just since March, to get to where we've gotten since March, I heard stories of there's a Vegas or a Nevada association being sued. They've already spent $1 million in discovery because they had a searchable, filterable commission field. And so who are you representing in that? You're not representing your buyer, you're representing yourself. And so that's where a lot of this has cause problems. So Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you and let the panel go down the line here, and just know that the association is here for you and we're working on your behalf.
So tons of information today, you guys. There's tons of information out there. If you have not gone to the facts.realtors, FACTS, the facts.realtor, you need to. There is a ton of information there. There is not a question specific to the settlement that's not answered on there that we've talked about this morning. So all of that is there. Going back to the 220, I would say be careful with how you use the 220. Don't just automatically send that 220 with an offer. Okay. First of all, it cannot be attached to your offer. Okay. That's violation of commission rules. But if you just send the 220 along with your offer, the seller could sign your offer, you could be under contract, and you could have no agreement for compensation. You should get that first. Yes. Or send an unsigned offer with that. Yeah, there's multiple ways.
Just can I share this? That what I would like to see happen is us just have a meeting about forms. Yes. A class about new forms.
Very good. So
putting that on the calendar. Yes, go ahead. Lori served on the forms committee.
The forms didn't change that much, guys. And 220's been around for a very long time. Okay? So read the forms. I've been on the forms committee. I've served on the forms committee. And I will tell you that one of the things, and Heather can attest to this, is John's first thing. He will say, agents don't read the forms. There are provisions. That's right. Well, find somebody to read the forms, but the provisions are in there to protect your commissions. The provisions are in there to protect you when the seller breaches and when the buyer breaches, okay? The 220 form, it looks different, but it's the same verbiage. It was just reworded. It's no different if you went to another association and wanted to sell a property down there. You would talk to the listing agent about what the compensation was going to be. The only thing that changed really significantly in the listing agreement and the buyer agents agreement this year was the provision from the NAR settlement that says commissions are not set by law. Everything else was really left untouched. We're not doing anything different. You're just putting your buyer agency at the front of the conversation versus at contract time. And for one, I think that's a better way to practice.
Read your contracts, you guys. Read the forms. Know and understand what they say, because there's no way you can properly serve the interests of a buyer or a seller if you don't know what those forms say.
So
I'll close with that. As obvious from this meeting today, that some of these things are still fluid. We're still trying to understand it and find out the best way to do this. So know that OBAR our heads have been buried in this stuff since the announcement of the settlement, and we're going to continue to monitor things. There may be changes coming in the future, and we'll figure out the best way to proceed. But again, just read your forms. I highly recommend you take a look at that non-exclusive buyer agency agreement if you're having trouble getting over the hump with a new buyer, because that's a great solution. And y'all, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of things I want to add real quick, because it happened this morning. And Jeff Scott had sent an email to the Real Estate Commission asking them if compensation, knowing compensation is a material fact. So the buyer know before they look at a property what the compensation is, so they would know if they have to pay it or if the seller is paying it to their agent. The Real Estate Commission replied and did not answer the question. Shocker there. So we're still working on that because I think it is. I think it would influence a buyer looking at a property or making an offer on the property. That's pretty basic. The other thing that they did put in there, just as a backup for what you heard earlier, they said a listing broker may advertise cooperative compensation in any form they please other than an MLS. That's true too. And as far as lawsuits go, we'll see how that's going. If later on this year Kraus has a new boat called Billable Hours, we'll know exactly what's going on with that.
My final words are that enforcement is hard. And that's my job, is enforcing these new rules in the MLS. Okay, I want you all to remember that there's a little button at the top of the listing that says correction. And if you see something, say something. You hit that correction button, you fill out a little spiel of what you see, and it comes directly to me. It does not go to the listing agent, doesn't go to anybody else, it just goes to me.
Stephanie, in your 2-day, 8:30 to 5 p.m. with lunch, we're not talking about forms. What are we talking about in buyer's agency, accredited buyer's representative? Are you going to touch on forms at all with the buyer forms?
We probably will do that, yes.
Okay, it's the 2-day course. We're offering it for free with lunch, snacks, everything for the 2 days. It's free. How much can I say about that? Richard, we have $513 to give away to somebody here today. All right, $1,026 was raised. $513 is going to the food pantry. And Richard, why don't you pick out a lucky number? And can we give our panelists a big round of applause, please? Yes.
477-9618.
477-9618. 477-9618. What? Okay, we're all following Stephanie to the bar right now. So, all right, everybody, thank you for being here. Don't forget to register for the CYA Summit.
I would like to give a special thanks to Captain Georges for accommodating this large group today. And if there's no further business before this, I now adjourn this meeting. Thank you.